Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 27th edition of SF Indie Fest. Our festival will be taking place February 6th through 18th, live at the Historic Roxy Theater, as well as virtually in your computer screens, which is how you are all experiencing our Bay Area Tales 2 Q&A today. So thank you so much to our audience for joining us. And a huge thank you so much to our filmmakers for being here with us today. I'm Sarah Marie Flores. I am the curator of the shorts programs for IndieFest, and I feel so lucky to get to highlight these amazing films. I would love to kick things off by inviting our filmmakers to tell us their name, what their role was on their film, as well as what their film is, and tell us about the genesis of their project. What made you want to tell this story or be involved in the telling of this story? And I'm going to start it off with Leonardo and Stefano. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm Leonardo Candidi. I'm the director of Like Me. Stefano here is a writer and co-everything. Also, co-director, assistant, and everything else. We are a duo. Yeah, we are two Italian filmmakers. We've been in the Bay Area for 10 years now, sometimes, and we've been making short films. We participated already in the SF Indie Fest in 2021 with another short, and was amazing and fun, very inspiring.
It's wonderful. And what was the genesis for this project? What made you want to tell this story?
So our story, as you saw in the short, it's a story about, also social media and the obsession from social media. So we thought it was something that was, everybody's story in a way. That's also why the title, Like Me. And so we want to tell that story. We want to tell in the format of short film that it gives us the possibility to experiment and play with the craft a little bit. So we use a cinematography and other tools to make a story that is, fit for a short film, for something that we can play with light, we can play with acting, we can play with the whole setup. So yes, so to tell a story that involves everyone, that is obsession with social media and how it's shaping our society nowadays.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. Hi, Miguel. Welcome. Please introduce yourself. Tell us what film you're here with and why the hell did you want to make it?
Hi, I'm Miguel Roderick. My film is No Vacancy. I'm the director and writer and animator, designer, basically a one-man short film. And the genesis is I kind of use art in a way to, I guess, validate my existence in a way. So I use it to. So the film is it's a way to like explain to myself the way my mind works, and yeah, that's just as I do art, I just find a way to like explain how I perceive the world. I kind of like the way that some directors say, like Tarantino says, I made this film just for me, everybody else is invited. I kind of see it that way too. I use art to just understand the way I see the world.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to kick it over to Linda. Hi, Linda.
Hello, I'm Linda Mai Green, and I'm the director of Mom de Green. I also wrote it and produced it. And the reason I wanted to make it, well, the genesis of it actually came from spending a lot of time in Eastern Oregon at a writing residency in this rural area where people were very casually talking about, Sasquatch coming and moving their crystals overnight and UFO mining sites and everything. And so I'm really fascinated by conspiracy theories and um, the sort of different crazy beliefs in the US, especially. And so I wanted to make a film about a woman sort of going from being a non-believer to a believer.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Linda, for joining us. And Mark, we'll kick it off with you and then we'll come back to Paul afterwards. But welcome, please introduce yourselves. Tell us what film you're here with and what the genesis was for you.
Sure.
and your role on the film.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks for SF Indie Fest. Great to be here. I'm Mark Tran, writing director of Mannequin. And the genesis of the Mannequin actually just much like the main character came from a place of delusion, as one might expect when you're not getting a lot of sleep due to raising an infant. And so I think the idea and the concept came at 3 a.m. in the morning when I was putting my daughter back to bed in the middle of the night. And at this point, I think the science says about children or babies at that age is that there's this idea of object permanence, which means that they can understand something exists outside of their purview. And so the delusional idea wasn't originally a film script or a movie concept, but the idea was, what if I had a mannequin that took my place and sat in the room with her so that she could go back to bed and I wouldn't need to be here. Much like, like how technology plays such a strong role in our lives as parents, is like, there's also this conflict of having other things help support the raising of your children. Whether this generation it's the iPad or the television, in the last generation the internet. And so I think it's a little bit of battling those themes right now as well, in the grand scheme of things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Paul, how about you? Please introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, my name's Paul Yen. I had the opportunity to play Min in Mannequin, and yeah, I jumped onto the project because for several reasons. Mainly because I've wanted to work with Mark for quite a while, and it just didn't work out in the past, and this opportunity presented itself, and I jumped at that opportunity. But as an actor and a person who doesn't want to have kids, I wanted to take on that challenge of playing someone who wanted to have kids, who didn't know how to handle having a kid. And yeah, and I just really enjoyed the story and loved it and wanted to be a part of it.
Oh, well, that's awesome. You embodied that character so beautifully. So
Thank you.
glad to have you both here. Great. So I would love to jump back over to Leonardo and Stefano, and really talk with you about the stark visuals in your film. Like your grasp of cinematography and just application of this like very surreal space, I think, is really special. Can you just talk about your visual approach to making Like Me?
Thank you. Sure. Yeah, we definitely wanted to use all the tool available to us for making something that would feel bigger than my living room. That's where we shot most of the short. So we use empty space a lot, and we wanted to also the audience to feel what the character was feeling. So we try to isolate him in this big empty black space that we created. And also we want a beautiful image. So we want to use light in a meaningful way to make, all the feelings and emotion that the character was going through evident. And, he has a little bit of dark horror-ish look, but we want to make it like beautiful in a way that was, also meaningful to the story. So we shot everything, as I say, pretty much in my living room, in a garage. But we want the audience not to know where this story is taking place, because it's the story of everybody. Everywhere. And so it should be a no place, an everywhere place. And also, yes, this industrial feeling sometimes, and with the sounds effect and sound design. We want to really create a new world, something that, only in a movie you can do, right? You can transform something like your living room in something totally different. So we wanted to experiment with that. It was definitely one of the goals at the beginning. Let's try every technique we can. And sometimes it was very simple. It was one light and a backdrop. But also with the acting and the makeup, it was fun to play around with everything. Yeah.
It was awesome. Thank you so much. Miguel, I would love to talk to you just about kind of your process. I mean, you stand out. I think this is one of the few animated projects that we have in the festival this year. But I would love to know kind of, did you always know that this was going to be animation? Do you kind of strictly work within that medium? And how did you come about finding your visuals? Did you have this kind of palette in mind as you were writing this project? Or like, how did you come to meld the story with the animation?
Yeah, I always, most of what I do work in animation. I just find it really hard to gather a lot of people to do live action. Feels like you need to have a lot of friends and connections, and I find it just a lot easier if I just embark on the journey on my own, you know. I did feel the animation style was working for the story that I wanted to tell, because a lot of it is trying to mimic how the mind works, and the mind has this like, it goes, at least my mind, I don't know how other people function, but mine, I just think about this thing for like a few seconds, and then it goes to this other thing, and you create the idea of how you're feeling is just more like a connection of all the things that you're thinking at once, in a way. And it felt a lot easier to do that with animation, like the fast transitions, the one place to another. I think it will probably be, you probably will find out there's a way to do it with live action, but I think that it just was an easier medium to work with. Yeah. And to your question about the visuals, I started the original idea was to do it very simple, flat 2D, so I could go through it faster, but it just wasn't working. So I ended up doing it more like 3D with a little bit of light, and that ended up being a 4-year process because of all the renderings and stuff. But I think it worked out well. Yeah.
It did indeed. Thank you so much for sharing. Linda, I would love to talk with you more about kind of the dynamic visual language that you use, because I think in your film you do this really beautiful job of like capturing this feeling of isolation. And I wondered if you could just talk about how you approach that as a director.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Obviously I worked really closely with my cinematographer, Andy Hoffman, who I've worked with before, to develop a visual language for that. And we were looking at a lot of 70s films, like also 70s documentaries. And I think, we just allowed the protagonist, Maggie, to kind of be in these big, natural vistas. And also, I think one thing, we didn't use a lot of like rails or camera movement. Like often we had a very a static camera. So I think that kind of lent to this sort of, it's almost like we're so used to seeing like cameras like move along the rails and like, zoom in and like do all these, kind of slick movements. And we were kind of like purposely staying away from that. And also, because she's looking underground and in water, and there's like this idea of something coming from above, we also used a lot of like high angle composition and low angles. So yeah, I hope that answers partially.
No, beautifully. And you do this great job of like helping the audience feel this sense of disorientation that I think leads into this like culmination within your story, when you're like, oh wait, maybe there's more to this than I was thinking. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll just say, Mark and Linda, like I feel like your films have kind of a tangential line to them, right? Of this, there's something more than what we're expecting. And I think you're both really dealing with this in a beautiful way. So in response to this, Mark, I'm not going to ask you a question yet. I'm going to talk to Paul about how you went about accessing your character, right? You kind of have like this like huge twist that I think the way that you play this character makes it land ever so much more, because you really feel like you're embedded within this one reality, right? Like that, like this relationship has been real, like it's wholly realized. How did you kind of lean into that as a performer of like knowing that this twist is coming and like keeping it feeling believable throughout your performance?
I I did a few things. I'm not a method actor or anything like that, but I had a pretty short period of time to prepare. It was about 2 weeks or so. Plus there was the dynamic of also learning Vietnamese because Vietnamese is my second language, English is my first. So I just try to stay up a majority of the time that we shot for like the week that we shot. I basically stayed up for the entire week that I was
Cool.
there. But I've also watched friends, my sister, my brother, who have raised their kids, my nieces and nephews, and I try to draw a lot from that and the stress and the kind of the helplessness of being a parent that I see, and which is a reminder to myself why I don't want kids. But as an actor, you're just always clocking things like, oh, how would I handle that? What would I do in this situation? And a lot of it was also kind of ingrained in the writing too, and you kind of see the stress and the I don't want to say helplessness, but just this laser focus that Min tried to have with his daughter,
Mhm.
and I try to draw that out, and I think just the not having sleep also just helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gave in for the art there. I need all the naps in between shooting, so good for you.
I'm all about naps,
Um,
girl.
okay, now Mark, having heard this from Paul, like let's talk about kind of the seeding that you're doing, because I think what's really interesting for me, at least, I watched the film initially and I was like, oh shit, there's this twist. And then you go back and you rewatch it in preparation for Q&As like this. Can you talk about like what kind of seeding you were doing through the visual language of your film so that once you get to this twisty moment that you're like, oh yeah.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I love that you call that out. It's, I think, even tied to the performance. Our main North Star for like all of our creative decisions was to help as much as we can get the audience into the mindset of Paul, or sorry, Min, the main character, and Paul at the same time. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was make it really difficult to tell the difference between reality, past, and fantasy, really. And so we tried as hard as we could to get that close together as possible, so that we could access that emotion as audience members with Paul. And so visually, we did that in a few ways through the lack of editing. I would say I think there are a few fun things that we did with with some of the one takes that we did. In that, in examples, myself and the cinematographer and one of our artists condensed 5 different scenes. It's the scene where where Paul sniffs the oil and gets brought back to a memory, and it takes him through 5 different scenes without editing in a one take. And we made that decision because of that North Star that we decided on together, to have us experience that in the way that the main character would, seamlessly.
Well, you nailed it. Cool. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for our Q&A today. Thank you so much to our filmmakers that joined us. And a bigger thank you to our audiences who are giving us their money. So thank you for supporting independent cinema and SF Indie Fest. And for those of you in the Bay Area, I hope you can come and join us for a live Q&A. So thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.